A long time ago, I made a video about the ethical dilemma people face, in theory at least, with respect to conflict minerals, specifically the minerals that are most commonly found in Central Africa: tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold, sometimes called the 3TGs. You see, electronic equipment requires these minerals in order to be functional, and so you need this stuff. And there's a lot of child exploitation, child slavery, labor, and even death takes place, and it's impossible to completely screen to see what is clean and what is not coming from these places. And I made the bet that most people would not, for the sake of ethical concerns, give up their fancy electronics, maybe even pay more for an assurance that there is no exploitation of children, whether in the form of labor, slavery, or death. Most people wouldn't make that move in the West. But gentlemen, today I need to talk about something gravely serious, arguably more serious than anything we've faced in our lifetimes. And that is the threat of the CCP and what China has unleashed upon the world. You see, we're in a real quagmire. We in the West and globally. We have an incredibly hostile power that has infiltrated every part of the world with its tendrils, through investment, through manipulation, through bribery. They're knee-deep in Africa. They're knee-deep in South America. They provide untold numbers of products to both Europe and the Americas. And they are right now, effectively, in a sense, the global economic hegemon. And yet, at the same time, they have unleashed this pandemic upon us. Every death that you see, every blip upon the screen, every number that goes up, the blame can be squarely laid at the feet of the CCP for their lack of responsibility, their lack of ethics, their lack of accountability, and the lies that they not only told at the beginning, but continue to tell, such as Italy being the source and the point of origin of the current pandemic. Or when the Lords of Pestilence claimed that it was a bioweapon cooked up in the United States. That's what they do, and that's what they tell their people. The Chinese people buy it hook, line, and sinker, because that's what they're used to. There's no effort to perform any kind of investigative journalism, and to the extent that there is, it's quashed, and those people are made to disappear. No, gentlemen, we have a very, very real threat on our hands. If you know somebody that's affected by the current pestilence, you can blame the CCP. I have family members in one of the epicenters of the current crisis, and they're very vulnerable due to their age. I am not pleased about what is happening. I have other friends that are deeply affected by this. This matter is probably the most important political, economic, and global issue we have faced. More important than anything else. Because the CCP, and broadly China, has revealed itself to be effectively the enemy of civilization. They've infected the world with this pestilence, and they lie about it. Then they claim to be the saviors. They sell equipment to Europe that half the time doesn't even work, and sow seeds of dissent through their lies and through their manipulation. For example, right now, the European Union, whatever you think about it, whether you think it's a horrible thing or a great thing or somewhere in between, which is my view, is in shambles. There are lockdowns on every border. Some people think that's great. Some people don't. In many places, you cannot cross the border at all. Some places, you cannot cross the border unless you have specific papers indicating a medical reason or pressing work matters, which makes sense. But there's no end in sight here. The ramifications, long-term, for the European Union, and some people are gleeful at this prospect, are likely that it will either dissolve, and if it does not dissolve, then all the benefits that one has as a member state will be de facto dead, meaning there might be a European Union, but we might be all trapped in our respective countries. I don't personally view this as a good thing, specifically with respect to my own personal interests, and I don't think this is a good thing, especially in light of the current global threat. You see, I understand many different sides of the political spectrum. I understand the nationalist concern. I understand the concern for personal sovereignty. Believe me, I do. I'm not a nationalist myself. I'm not really anything. I tend to look at issues individually. But the problem we're facing here, specifically in Europe, and I'll get to some of these other countries, is that Europe has never been at its weakest in decades right now. because of this pestilence which is ravaging certain places. And mind you, the European authorities handled this horribly. Horribly. The pestilence was already afoot in Europe, and we had festivals going on. There was an idiotic women's march in Spain on the 9th of March, when we knew the pestilence was afoot. Or rather, the authorities knew. And now, as we say in German, we have the salad, or we have to deal with the consequences. This could have been, at the very least, if not outright prevented, minimized massively. And after all these massive gatherings, of course, to no one's surprise, there were huge numbers of new cases. So I'm not saying the European authorities handled this well. They didn't. They were clueless, headless chickens. But now we're in a situation in Europe where everyone's playing the blame game, pointing fingers. People don't want to aid each other, understandably. And some people are really happy about that. The problem we're facing right now is huge. That problem is China, and specifically the CCP. Whatever you think about the European Union, whatever you think about cooperation, we honestly at this stage need a cooperative effort, at least in Europe, if not globally, to deal with this. Not just the pandemic, but the economic aspects here. You see, because China has us all by the balls, we are unwilling to take the necessary measures, unwilling to criticize, and unwilling to rebel against these Lords of Pestilence, our masters. Why did I mention conflict minerals in the beginning? Because we're in a similar situation now. The price to be paid to defy Beijing, the CCP, and China at large would be a very, very heavy price indeed. It would require manufacturing back at home, reestablishing institutions and production that could take years to get off the ground, and paying prices much higher than we're accustomed to. And no one's willing to do it. And so what do? We bend over and take it up the ass. I get it. It's easier to pay for the cheap stuff. We would rather be slaves to our Chinese overlords than to defy them. And believe me, we have the power. China is powerful, but a united Western front, they couldn't handle us. Not if we actually thought and acted cooperatively, which we're not doing now. We're just pointing fingers at everyone else. Europe is perhaps the worst of this. And now we have situations in Europe where the president of Serbia is actively praising the Chinese, calling them saviors and their closest friend, better friends than the other European countries, whatever that means. Things are changing in Europe. Hungary has become a soft dictatorship, and these measures that have been taken have no end in sight. And the only question is, what can we do about the CCP? Forget about the physical presence for the time being of the pestilence that they have unleashed upon the world. They're responsible, and they're spreading lies even as I speak. And we sit here and do nothing. We just accept it. And if it weren't bad enough in Europe, to my fellow human beings in the land of kangaroos, well, if anyone's got you by the balls, it's China. You have entire enclaves there where you won't see a sign in anything but Hanzi or Chinese characters for miles. And you're just as dependent in your own way on their goods as we are in the West and Europe and the United States. This is the number one political, economic, global issue of our time. People talk about global warming. They talk about pollution. Who creates the most pollution in the world? It's not the West, and yet these cowards in power never call out China. The time has come to call out China. Now that they have blood on their hands, now that they've killed other people, tens of thousands of people in countries that never did anything to them, and it's guaranteed that more people will pass. Now the time has come to call them out. And part of the problem in China is, even to the extent in the West there's a lot of crony capitalism, we're noticing this again with the bailouts that remind me of the 2008 bailouts for billionaires on Wall Street. Private companies in China are not private. They're in bed with the CCP. They all are. So let's talk about something concrete. In the gaming world, Tencent, which is China's largest publisher of video games, their largest entertainment unit, they have their fingers in the pie all over Western games. This includes Blizzard, Ubisoft, but more importantly, it includes things like Epic Games, and they own massive shares, Riot Games, which make League of Legends, Bluehole, they make PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, grinding gear games, Path of Exile. We can't allow them to unleash a pestilence upon the world and have us foot the bill for it and treat them with kid gloves. Unfortunately, the threat now is far greater than the Soviet Union ever posed, and I grew up during the 80s. Sure, there was a red menace. Well, guess what? The current red menace is that much more menacing. The Soviet Union was not investing in every nook and cranny of the West. They didn't control huge swaths of the Western entertainment media industry. The time has come for all of us who are concerned about the fate of the world and the people we care about to start calling out China and the CCP. There's no way around that. There's no way around that. And what people are going to do, unfortunately, is if and when we ever get over the current pestilence, is that they're going to try to play it all down and try to go back to business. And we go into further debt and dependence on the Chinese, which is the last thing we want. So, anyway, look at this video as a clarion call. This is very, very serious. Everyone's future is being affected by this. We can't just sit around and allow China to take over the world. And unfortunately, our buffoon politicians are doing a terrible job of dealing with a lot of this. But maybe, just maybe, there'll be some awareness that arises from this that can lead to active dissent and rebellion against our Chinese overlords, because that's what they are right now. They own us. They own us, and they're murdering us with their pestilence. Everyone, thanks for tuning in, and I'll check you out at a later date if I'm still alive. Take care. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.